Okay, welcome to I'm a Black Woman. Yes, I Matter special edition. This is all about white terrorism and why I think it's important that we call it out and we call it what it is. We're probably only going to have a discussion for 10 minutes or so, but feel free to put some thoughts in the comments and then I'm happy to respond back. So let's get it started. It was so interesting and so apropos that I decided to do this talk today. Mainly because last night I was out and having dinner with some awesome, dope Black professionals, like just kicking it. We're having a good time. And somewhere along the conversation, we just started talking about what does it mean to be your authentic self? What does it mean to interact with people who have perceptions of you that may be different from the perception you have of yourself? And I thought, man, this actually aligns completely to why I think it's so important that we call everything that is happening in this country white terrorism and not supremacy. The main reason is supremacy is it's a softer way of saying exactly what's happening to us as Black people in this country. As Black people in this country, we are in fact being terrorized. There is a war against us. There always has been a war against us since the moment they brought us over to this country. So when you do the word supremacy, you're kind of whitewashing, and we're really thinking about the fragility and the feelings of white folk. And the main reason we do that is, it's sort of protective, right? Because we know that when we are prideful, when we are strong, when we speak truth to power, there's also oftentimes a very negative effect that happens, right? So when white people's feelings get hurt, when they're angry, they love to weaponize the police. They love to weaponize their whiteness. They love to weaponize their fragility and their feelings. And we're the ones who end up losing, right? Oftentimes, especially if police are called, we could lose time, we could lose freedoms, and we can lose our lives. I mean, it is a real threat. But being conciliatory, being more into the assimilation side, really putting those feelings of white folks before our own so that the words feel a little bit more palatable and they feel a little bit more comfortable, really doesn't do us a service. We really want to see change. We really want to affect the ecosystems and the dynamics of what's going on. We have got to call what is happening terrorism. It is straight terrorism. When you think about the effects of war, for example, when you think about the effects of war, for example, you've got genocide oftentimes, you've got PTSD, you've got the buildings of a second-class citizen, you've got people who lose, obviously, their lives and their freedoms. That has been happening to Black folk from the moment we step foot on this country, generation after generation after generation. That's why I say we have to call it white terrorism. The other reason why I don't like to use white supremacy is just the word whiteness so close to the word supreme, it's a problem. Even though it's used in a negative connotation, there's still power in the thought that there is a supremacy in being white. Well, there isn't. So what's happening in this country is not supremacy, it is terrorism. And so let's talk about all the ways that terrorism actually shows up in this country, right? I mean, obviously, we should just say white terrorism is, in fact, domestic terrorism. But let's call it out. It takes on the form of violence. It takes on the form of denial. It takes on the form of victim blaming. It is all of the structures that we are talking about, the institutionalized structures that continue to keep Black folk as second-class citizens. And so even something as simple as a young Black boy or a young Black girl going to school, which is supposed to be a safe environment, oftentimes our students are going into schools that have police officers, that have teachers who do not look like them, who do not understand them, and who frankly are afraid of them, which is why you have so many articles and news stories around students 3, 4 years old being handcuffed, being suspended from school. No child is that bad. right? These are children. Okay, so already from a young age, children are being terrorized when in a place that's supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be a safe place for learning, a safe place for community building. So automatically, we've already got terror going on in these students' minds, and they're traumatized. And then we continue to traumatize them because they will say things like, well, how can they learn? They're not learning anything. Well, of course they're not learning anything because their minds are not right. They don't feel safe. They have constant terror. They have constant threats that are going on. It also looks like, what else does white terrorism look like? It looks like public school education and ed reform that is oftentimes led by white people who know nothing about our communities, who don't know what it's like to be Black, and who decide what are the values that our students and our children need. And they discredit the values that our children already bring to the table. Right. I remember I've worked in all kinds of school systems across the United States, and there was a long time where people would talk about grit. Oh, the kids need grit. I'm sitting here thinking our babies already have grit by virtue of the fact that they are Black and they walk through this world and they still find time to be happy and to be children. They have grit, they have determination, and they can also find joy in moments that they're doing it. Guys, please feel free as you're hopping in, make a comment, because I would love to chit chat. I would love to hear what you're thinking, saying. If you agree, if you disagree with what I have to say. Okay, another way that white terrorism shows up. And again, I keep falling into education because education is where we really indoctrinate. Let's just call it what it is. Public school education, especially in the United States here, is about indoctrination, is about assimilation, it's about erasure of our culture. And so we're seeing that play out currently in the country, right? All of this hoopla around quote unquote critical race theory, which is never ever taught in the K through 12 spaces anyway. So when we talk about white terrorism, we've got teaching students white history, white normatives, white language, and white values, right? Saying things like, working parents don't care about their kids because they can't make it to an arbitrary PTA meeting, or making it difficult for parents to come in and start talking to you about, hey, what's going on with my kid, and talking down to them. That's also looking like deciding that people are not intelligent because they speak another language. Well, first of all, we know most Americans are not even bilingual. So we should be respecting folks who absolutely are, to be able to think and then translate and speak in another language as they're learning English. That is amazing. That's something that we should be celebrating. But oftentimes we do not celebrate. We oftentimes put students who are English language learners into special needs classes. We say that they need IEPs, which means that they have some kind of learning disability, instead of thinking to ourselves, no, they are just trying to figure out, how do I translate from one language that I'm learning, English, to the language that I actually know? Let's just call it out, say it's Spanish. And then how do I bring that back and answer my teacher back again in English? That is an amazing process that is happening that we do not elevate. And the reason we don't elevate is because white folks don't find value in that. They haven't found value in, at least based off of the American school system, and being bilingual, et cetera. So, and so you've got like all these moments in time where we just don't value the ways that people speak. And then this brings me, and I think I've talked about this before, right? Like, hey, Ebonics. Now, I used to be an English teacher, okay? And I used to teach kids, you think you know English, but you don't. So we're going to talk about the language of success. And it was actually a really interesting mindset to have my students understand what it means to code switch. And oftentimes, as Black folk, we know, you guys know what I'm talking about code switching, around speaking in a certain way when you're in the workplace, and speaking a certain way when you're around white people versus like how you speak when you're around Black folk. But, the truth of the matter is, when I think about it, our babies are also learning a second language because they really understand Ebonics a little bit more, which is a dialect, oftentimes in their homes, that is often frowned upon and seen as you being unintelligent. You don't have the capacity to learn. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on my podcast, VCB News. I'm going to just do a quick shout out. But there's literally in the medical books, medical history, we saw it in the NFL, where literally studies have been shown to say that Black folk are not as intelligent as white people. Guys, that is white terrorism. All right, that's not white supremacy. That is white terrorism, because you are putting upon someone already traumatic experiences, bringing them down to second-class citizens. And think about what that means to internalize all of those messages that you're not safe, that you're not intelligent, that you can't be who you are. When you have that in your mind constantly, that is trauma. We know that there are now studies, especially out of Harvard and Yale, for example, that say racism is a health concern. They say racism is a health concern. I say, again, this is about white terrorism, and it is a health concern. It's killing us. We are dying earlier than our counterparts. Yes, we can talk about food, and we can talk about diet. We can talk about all of those things. But actually, the most important factor is probably stress. And it is so stressful being Black in this world to think, man, I'm just walking down the street, or I'm jogging in my neighborhood, and then I'm getting gunned down. And we know what case I'm talking about, the Ahmaud Arbery case, right? And there's only one Black juror on there. That again is about white terrorism. How can we have, how in the world can that happen in the town in which he was gunned down and was 26% Black, but there's only one Black juror on there? I mean, that is ridiculous, right? And so you can think about the trauma that the family is going through, but also think about the messaging and the constant messaging that we're getting as Black folk, that our lives do not matter as much, that people can kill us, not just police officers, literally anybody, citizens who feel quote unquote threatened. Threatened how? Threatened by our presence. That's it. Just walking down the street, just driving, just jogging, just going to the grocery store. So all of these tasks that oftentimes white people take for granted, we have to be worried about, like, am I going to the right neighborhood? Am I dressed appropriately? Is someone going to take offense to how I look? Is someone going to take offense if I ask a question, if I have a concern, or if I know that I'm being disrespected and I want to talk to someone about that? Like, how can we have a conversation? And you can't, because tears start coming down the faces. Then you start being called angry and aggressive. And then people want to start threatening your freedom. And all of a sudden you're looking like the bad guy. That is terroristic. So all of those micro and macro aggressions that are happening are all about terror. So what is happening to Black people is trauma. It is terrorism. And I see so many people are saying this is an important conversation. Yes, so please, guys, send this off to your friends. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have conversation. Let's create these safe spaces, because we need to talk about it. We can't change anything if we don't have the correct language and we don't have the correct framework. And that's why language is so important, right? So that's why I'm so adamant, and I'm going to keep saying it, that this is terror. Because that is what it's designed to do. It's designed to make us afraid, so that we just say that it's okay for us to be treated as less than human beings. I said this was going to be a conversation for just about 10 minutes. We're in 15 minutes now. So I do want to leave you with this poem by Langston Hughes. I will continuously have this dialogue, so I should mention that. I'll be talking about this on Instagram. I'll be talking about it on Twitter. I'll be talking about it at LinkedIn. So you can follow me, Kwamara Denise. So that's my name, KWAMARA DENISE. So follow me, Kwamara Denise. Subscribe to this channel, because we're going to be talking more and more about these important issues. And there's going to be no holds barred. I am radical. I am revolutionary. I believe in speaking truth to power. I do not believe in sugarcoating words. We're going to talk about it the way it is, and we're not going to worry about the fragility and the feelings of white folk, because they darn sure not worried about ours. Okay, so the poem by Langston Hughes. Negroes, Sweet and docile, meek, humble, and kind. Beware the day they change their mind. Wind in the cotton fields, gentle breeze. Beware the hour it uproots trees. And I'll leave you there. Thank you, Langston Hughes. Guys, please follow me, Kwamara Janice. I've loved enjoying talking to you, and tell people it is not white supremacy. What is happening is indeed white terrorism.